Good afternoon. I'm John Wells. I produce and host Cool Science Radio for KPCW. It's the NPR affiliate in Park City. Delighted to introduce to you right now Bill Ribaudo. He is the senior partner for Deloitte Touche. Bill, a year ago, I was at your session at the FiRe conference, and it was riveting, fascinating to say the least. I took your special letter and I sent it to my kids and also to some friends. And I know you have a lot of new material you're going to be taking us through, but before you do, there's some folks that don't have the foundational pieces to this, and maybe you can take a couple of minutes and take us through it.
Sure, be happy to do that. Thank you, John. And where's Barrett? She almost killed this session, which I was preparing. John and I prepped ahead of time and everything. So yes, John, I've been a speaker here, I think the last 4 or 5 years. And Mark Anderson and I have been teaming up on a number of these different subjects, and I also speak at the predictions event in New York. I think I've spoken there a couple of times. So I don't know how many of you have either been in some of the prior sessions that you saw me speak, or maybe were in New York, but I think you are right, John. It would be good to maybe just give a little bit of a background as far as what we're talking about, because I think what I want to present, either new or in review for you, is an if-then statement. If you believe in what I'm going to show you, then it raises a number of questions. And the work that we've done first answered the if, and then it led us to question a number of other things. And basically what we've been doing each year is completing another element of our research on the next then, and then showing that here. But let me maybe first review in one slide the first if. And let's see if we'll give it a push here and get a slide up. This was the culmination of a couple of years worth of work where we basically asked the question about the relative value of corporations and tried to understand why are some companies worth dramatically more than other companies. How is it possible that companies that don't have cash flow are worth so much money? What is the determining factor? And this was published about 4 or so years ago in a special letter that was called The Great Race. And in our mind, there's this great race going on in corporate, I'll say America, but it's actually happening around the world, although most of our work is focused on the U.S. stock exchange and the S&P 500 because it's the most transparent and it's the largest and the most diverse and all of that. And this great race is being set up because there's a bifurcation of value today. There are the companies that get a lot of capital, have high valuations, and then the companies that don't. And what is driving that? And it's demonstrated here in the slide that I believe is behind me. And so let me just run it through you real quickly. There's 4 kinds of companies in the world. It's all based on the assets that they use to make their money. Bottom left is physical assets. We call them asset builders. Bottom right, service providers are using human, in some cases, financial capital. So the services business would be like Deloitte, Accenture, any of the big service companies that you could think of. The asset builders, you've got them right there, the hospitals, the industrials, et cetera. Then you cross this digital divide, and you have companies that leverage soft assets instead of hard or human, although human assets are physical as well, right? So you've got beneath the digital divide, you've got the physical side. Then you go to more soft assets. You've got IP being the asset that's leveraged. So think about it easily as software companies, franchisors, biotechnology, where you're developing a piece of IP and you're licensing it. And then in the top right, you have companies that focus on the asset being the network that they're able to orchestrate. And what you see here in this model is, and just think about scaling. If I'm building things, and I don't care if they're clothespins or microchips, for every one I want to sell, I have to build it. So the business model is make one, sell one. And just think about how fast that business does or doesn't scale. And then you move to the consulting business where, for every hour we want to build, we have to hire it. But of course, we hire it in 2,000-hour increments. Right. And these bottom two businesses are all about utilization. Right? If the factory, whether it's a human factory, or if the factory has high utilization, you make money. If it doesn't, you don't. You cross the digital divide, it changes dramatically. In the IP world, once you are successful with making it, make it once, sell it many times at very small incremental cost. Or if you're orchestrating a network, it normally is a platform, in this case, usually a technological platform that other people trade on. So of course you have the social networks and all of that, but you also have the credit card companies, right? It's a technological platform that retailers and consumers trade on. You have the stock exchanges, they sit in there as well. And the point of valuation is what they're worth as a multiple of revenue. So 1 times, 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, it's almost exponential. So stop. A company is worth a multiple of its revenue based on the assets it uses in order to run its business. And each one of these scale slow, medium, faster, really fast. And investors pay for the promise of future profits. So how would you promise them that your future profits are going to be really high? Show me a business model that scales. Don't tell me that you're going to build more widgets and build more factories to build more widgets. I can calculate that. It's linear growth. Show me something that has higher growth. Higher growth equals higher valuation. And so as a result of this model, you're then able to ask a bunch of these questions. So let me then give you the if. If $1 of revenue is not equal to $1 of value, it's not 1 to 1. Some pieces of revenue, types of revenue, are worth more. If that's true, what else do we have to begin to question? Right. And that is the beginning if. Yeah. Right? Because a lot of people don't see it that way. Or what they don't see as corporate leaders is whatever box they sit in, and let's suggest most of them, which by the way, 83% of the S&P 500 is beneath the digital divide. So it's a long ways to go here. Those companies view $1 equals $1 almost. Okay, 2, big deal, right? Not a big difference. They don't see, and by the way, these are bell curves in here. That 8 is 7 to 15. So let's talk about a company that's trading at 2.5 times revenue, and what are they missing that could be traded at 14, 15, 12 times revenue? Dramatic, dramatic differences.
Okay, and just to draw the distinction, all companies that are in those 4 quadrants use technology, but it's those top 2 that technology is their business.
So thank you. You have read the paper. There's a huge distinction of what is digital. And what's happened in the business world these days is digital has just become another one of these ubiquitous terms that as a result of its ubiquity, nobody knows what it means anymore. So we're going digital. We're going to be digital. It's like, what? So I define digital 2 different ways. Technology in the business that makes you better, faster, cheaper, that's the majority of it, versus technology is the business. That's right. And the difference here is those above it is technology is the business, especially in the upper right.
Before we move on, are there any quick questions?
That could be dangerous because there could be a lot.
There could be a lot. Let's move on.
Okay. So here's the first question that got asked, and it was asked at the first session of FiRe that I attended and spoke at, and Mark asked it. He said, but Bill, are there different business models for countries? And long story short, we actually approach this in 2 different ways around how a country makes money, but also where we converged, because that was Mark's initial question into it. We converged around, well, does the measurement of GDP make sense anymore? So just stop. What is the measure of GDP? The measure of GDP is a measurement of the output of goods and services. In 2013, they added in R&D, so now you're getting a little bit of a soft piece to it, but it is largely the output of goods and services, which means that $1 of revenue equals $1 of value, which, wait a minute, if that's true, then is the measurement of GDP and comparing the wealth of countries correct? It can't be, because it assumes a dollar equals a dollar, and we've just proven that that's not true. So what we did was he said, well, let's take a look at it. Is there any correlation between business model and GDP? So this is a complicated slide. You know, it's got a lot of information on it. Step back like a nice Van Gogh. Just step back. Where you see green, you see green. Where you see red, you see red. It's near perfect correlation other than Japan and Great Britain, and maybe there's one other in there. That's, I think, 11 countries. It equals 68% of global GDP. It is 3 separate studies over 7 years, a 3-year period, a 2-year period, and a 2-year period. Everything continues to show the same. If a country, through its regulatory policies, supports all 4 business models, the economy grows. If they don't, which would mean by default they focus on the previous bottom 2 models, which have been around for 100 years, if they only focus on those, the economy shrinks. Stop, emphasis. I didn't say one grows more than the other. I said it's digital, sorry to use the word. It's a 0 or a 1. If you support all 4, your economy grows. Right. If you don't, it goes in the reverse.
If the United States is 19 trillion and they're twice that of China, are they twice that, or because of your model, are they more?
So the model would indicate that the 19 should be inflated.
Yes.
And though China does have a number of business models in above the digital divide, but theirs would not be inflated as much. So you'd take 19 and 11, and you'd push the 19 up quite a bit, and the 11 up some.
Right.
Yes.
As a person responsible for a country, are they looking at these models to grow their countries? Are they also looking at these models to figure out how to weather a storm and an economic downtime?
So the difficult thing, and I always have to be really careful. So one is, I was almost going to say almost everything. Everything that we have done and that we talk about is all based on our research. So we don't come up with, and therefore I think, no, it's all based on the research. The second thing that we always make it clear is I don't think our work replaces anything that countries are already doing. And so if you believe that a way to bring an economy stronger is to create more manufacturing jobs, even though that's in the bottom left, I wouldn't say that's wrong. I'm just saying in addition to everything that you would normally do around the complexities of driving an economy, you have to look at this additional filter and say, what are we doing in that respect? And there's a lot of things that you have to do in order to support network orchestrators that are actually good for the core businesses that are using that. And I do want to just point out where you see the 2 areas where they don't correlate as well, which is in Japan, and you could easily talk about Abenomics there and the artificial stimulus that's going on, and then of course Brexit in the UK, which would be 2 of the larger economies that are in there. You see some of the others flip-flop, but actually stays in, so Germany and France you see flip-flopping back and forth. Let me, if I can, let me go to education. So the Great Race, then we issued a second paper called The Great Country Race, which was focused on this work. Then we began to ask ourselves, well, what about education? And I have spoken about that, but we've done a tremendous amount more work around education because, well, wait a minute, if there's 4 kinds of different business models and it's driving GDP, what are we teaching our kids? So now, I should have pointed out earlier, our color schemes are always really important. So dark blue and dark green are the 2 business models underneath the digital divide. In the countries that we studied, what the curricula contents are, there it is, and you don't see any, although the colors are a little bit off here, but you don't see any light green and light blue. Those are the darker colors, which means basically we're teaching the old stuff. So when we finished looking at those countries and their top schools, we then said, let's do a deep dive in the US because of course it's more transparent, it's large, it's got all different segments, and let's go figure that out. And so what we did here, as you can read, is that the US, despite its success, mirrors what's going on in the rest of the world. In fact, you see the United States in its colors. It's still the two bottom colors primarily. That when you look across undergrad, MBA, and even executive education, less than 10% of the content is above the digital divide.
You're saying 90% of what we teach our kids is below the digital divide.
We're teaching
90%.
them how finance works for manufacturing and service businesses, and a little bit of technology or the IP side. But remember, the information revolution occurred in the, what, 70s? No, 90s, and date myself.
And I remember something you said last year. It's not just the education system, but the parents are going out and they're buying erector sets for their kids.
So we've been working on a book that we keep promising is coming, and we keep doing more research and adding chapters. Because there's a chapter that I've coined as how we speak to our children. Because I don't think we even realize as we impart values to our children, and I don't mean, cultural, country, religious, I don't mean those kinds of values, but like what is valuable, at least maybe say from a business perspective. Yeah, we're buying erector sets more than we are talking about coding, although it's coming up to the curve quite a bit. And of course, there, for a few years, has been a coding for girls kind of thing, but that's trying to solve a gender issue more than it is recognizing that value has shifted. What's valuable has changed.
Bill, when you look at the numbers of education and the percentage below the digital divide, is there any granularity between high school, college, and graduate?
There is. We didn't yet study high school, but I know it's going to be worse. So the higher you go up from undergrad, MBA, and then executive education, it gets better. But, we're talking small. Let me give you a sense of it. I think I have a good slide on it. So again, a little bit of an eye chart. Let's just simplify it. These are the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are 8 economic sectors where they publish information about the goodness or the economy of these sectors in the U.S. Just look at the right-hand side of the red to green and look at where the arrows are placed. The first line is their actual kind of GDP, and then the bottom one is the overall. But you can see the different metrics that we use. And then look at the pie charts, again, using colors. And what you see is it's backwards to me, to the right, to the left. To the left of the red line, it's 10%. And to the right, it's 5%. So I'm not sure yet, but I think we're seeing that there is correlation. You could say it's 100% difference, 5 to 10%, but then again, I'm not sure if it's in the margin of error, that says that those economies on the left that are doing better have 10% of their curriculum above the digital divide. Those that aren't doing as well only have 5. So maybe there's something there, but we're not too sure about it yet. So despite where you look across the globe, whether you look at undergrad, grad, and executive ed, it's kind of all the same, which is a problem, right?
Sure.
And so then the only one that's kind of a question mark you should be able to see in there is Austin, where they actually have 10%, almost 10%, but the economic indicators aren't suggesting that.
Okay. What else are you tracking?
So what we're doing now, and the title of our talk today was trying to put it all together. And kind of, if you put all the tracking together, what do you get with respect to, I'll call it the wealth of nations, not to coin Smith. And so here's our message here, which is the alignment of business, so the great race, with education, content, and government, the great country race. If you put that together, that's probably what we have to focus on in order to drive a nation's wealth. And we've created this kind of circular, because I don't know where the chicken and where the egg begin and where it ends with respect to what businesses, education, and government can do, right? Does the government have to first create an environment that will allow the businesses to be created and thrive?
Right.
Or does regulation follow to support what's been created? And then where's education policy vis-a-vis the rest of it, right? And so you might just say, I think if I could start all over again, I'd say you have to have regulatory policy that includes education policy and content, which drives the creation of these businesses. And as a result of our work, we've keynoted, my colleague Seema Bajaj and myself have keynoted economic forums. We were recently nominated and accepted onto the OECD's Economic Policy Committee for Digitalization. And so if you look here, I think this is part of what the answer is, that businesses that are traditional need to move up by either buying or building, and some of them are doing it, businesses above the digital divide in order to drive their valuation. Education needs to include content on these new business models, and government's job is to create the environment for all of that to flourish. And how are we doing on our time here?
Yeah, we have 6 minutes.
so-
As you meet with business leaders and country leaders around the world, what sort of reaction are you getting? What sort of feedback are you getting?
It's interesting. So
Are they starting to pay attention?
very, very early, like 2 of the ones that we've spoken to have.
Okay.
There's a number of interesting things going on. First of all, we've not focused too much on the U.S. because the U.S. is relatively pretty far ahead. And we have been focusing on Central Europe, where we think there may be the larger opportunity because a number of them are getting together. There's the Visegrad group of 4 countries of Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and what did I miss? Poland. Those 4 create the V4, and they've put together a Budapest Declaration that's focused on becoming more digital.
Tremendous upside.
And so there's some interest there. But it is interesting that when we do speak to them, many of them are still mired in the issue of kind of creating tech workers. And in many cases, they see tech workers as creating service centers for the U.S. technology companies, which to me, in my model, is bottom right, not above the digital divide, right? But you'll find like Romania's done a better job with respect to creating much more early stage technology oriented businesses. I actually have spoken at some of the technical institutes as well, so I call them the MITs of Central Europe, and where some of their educators are focusing and beginning to understand is it's not just about, and this is probably a message for this entire group as I listen to the different presentations we've had here, it's not only about the technology, right? I mean, of course, you've got to invent these new technologies, but it's what business model are you going to create with those technologies? Because if you're just going to build something, I can tell you what the value of your business will be. And so we're actually, on the other hand, even though we're working with large corporations trying to make these migrations, we're also working with the smaller companies, the startups, with respect to how do you, what should be your business model, then how do you position around that? Some of whom have been here.
These are your mental models.
So yes, good points. Each one of these subjects I think we could talk for a bit on. So my colleague...
Tell me what you believe.
Yeah, thank you. So my colleague Seema is a psychology major, and that's what she brings to the team.
Thank you, Seema.
Part of what she brings to the team.
Sitting right back there.
Yeah, yes. And so we've built this model as well that says, based on what you believe, you will build a business based on your beliefs. And based on the business that you build, we can kind of calculate your worth. And so we often say, tell me what you believe, and I'll tell you what you're worth.
I'll tell you what you're worth.
Right? And if you think about the economic revolutions we've had throughout our country, you had the industrialists, right? So just think of each one of these business models. Asset builders, you've got the industrialists, the railroad barons, the shipping magnates. I'm from Boston, so I can say Newport Mansion wealth. Then you've got the services revolution, which nobody made a ton of money, but a lot of the manufacturers figured out that we could service that which we build. But then you had the information revolution, and we had people in the 90s that became hundreds of millions of dollars of their personal wealth. But in about 2010, we had the network revolution, where you have 30-year-old billionaires, right? And so you can just see this value shift and increase. So.
You've added a lot of value to this, and would you like to take a couple questions?
I would, and let me leave a takeaway here. Let's do that. Yeah. So here's our kind of takeaway, if you will. Nations that build the greatest wealth will likely, as I have to put in because of QA, but nations that build the greatest wealth will be those that can successfully integrate the adoption of all 4 business models into their regulatory policies, modernize their education content, and provide this regulatory environment. Countries that don't do that are going to fall behind.
Okay. Fascinating. Questions?
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, love the data and the presentation.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on reconciling the tremendous business advantage of digital connectivity with the cyber risk disadvantage and liability side? Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a very big question, and I don't honestly believe that there is an answer to it. It aligns with other questions that we often get, which is around risk of failure, right? And so how have you built into your financial model, if you will, the risk of failure? And so let me answer yours in the context of that. We haven't built it in. We haven't said what the risk is. What we've said is for those that are successful, because this is based on the US S&P 500 over 40 years, by the way. We studied it back 40 years. This is what's there. This is what happened. So it assumes the success that if you can build a technology and can license it, that's what it's worth. If you can't, I know it's not worth anything, but if you can't build a product and run a manufacturing facility, it's not worth anything either. So for those that are successful, with respect to the risks associated with being digital and the cyber issues and all of that, my reaction is, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
So sometimes I would get reactions from CEOs about, well, but I understand my business, it's in my 4 walls, and moving outside of that is risky. And I said, yeah, it's pretty risky not to move outside your 4 walls. Let's talk about the retail industry. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the travel and hospitality industry and what's happened to it. We often use a matrix of fuse and bang. So you can look at every single industry and you can say how long is the fuse and how big will the bang be with respect to being disrupted by digital-based business models. Because what's happening is the tech guys are coming into all these different industries and they're beginning to chip away. And remember, if you want to hurt a business, you don't have to make it disappear. You just have to take a piece of its growth away. All you need to do to destroy a business's value is take a piece of the growth away. That eliminates the conversation, retail's dead, it's all going to be online. Who cares? Are the physical retailers being hurt as a result of online retailing? Yes. Dramatically impacting their values.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. 2 quick things. One is, if you have an SNS subscription, go back to August of 2018. You'll be able to get his special letter. If you don't, we'll figure out a way to get that to you. Secondarily, Bill, you'll be out in the lobby afterwards for those that haven't gotten their questions answered. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.